What is up? We are back to talk about one of the heavyweight kings of comedy, a 21st century comedy legend, Sebastian Maniscalco. He is back with a new Netflix comedy special called Is It Me? I think Sebastian is most known for his, one, being Italian, two, talking about his Italian father as an Italian guy with an Italian father. I always connect to those guys, Chris Stefano, Paul Verzies, those type of dudes. Sebastian is known for his more elegant style, his big, hyperactive movements, his facial expressions. Sebastian brings a lot to the comedic table. Before we get into the review, Sebastian has been killing it since his last special. He's had a few movies that he's been in, like big time. One was a Martin Scorsese movie, The Irishman. And when these kind of things happen, a lot like UFC fighters, when they start doing broadcast work and movies, I wonder, is your main craft going to suffer? So we start this special, Is It Me? And the intro is him giving this spiel about what he thinks Las Vegas should be again, the Sinatra days of the Rat Pack, and he's, comically placed himself in there. And the special starts. It looks like he's putting in a bid to host the Oscars. Everything is gold. It looks very elegant. He comes out in a very sharp suit. And that was kind of like, okay, all right. Sebastian is very aware of his status now because he looks the part. He looks like one of the kings of comedy. He's putting on this big, elegant display. Hey, that's very on brand for Sebastian. One of his first specials, he was wearing like some kind of vest, and he was like, yeah, Sebastian's a fancy dude. So he starts the special off, and it took me 3 times to actually finish the whole thing. I got about 20 minutes in, and that wasn't because I was uninterested. That was more because my kid kept requiring my attention other places. So today, I literally just got back from sitting down and watching it all the way through. No distractions, no phone, no nothing. And I thought that it actually started out a little slow for a Sebastian special. The main special, he has like a filler joke or two about, just kind of getting into the special. But it really starts with his observations about his wife, right? And he is so good at being relatable, even when he's so clearly far above everyone else as far as success and materialistically and career-wise, right? But he shows the common struggles that he has of like his wife taking forever to get out of the car. I think most men can, associate with that feeling of being like, we just got here. We drove 20 minutes to get here. How are you still preparing yourself to get out? Like, I think that's a common thing that he drew out in a very artistic way. And he didn't really end it there. He kept going with all the way from driving to a restaurant to walking into the restaurant to walking to the table to once you get at the table. And he's picking at these little micro annoyances that really seem to bother him. He's playing or giving light to his social anxiety, something that, a lot of Italian men, they're not going to say, I have social anxiety. I don't want to be out in public. And as someone who is a focus on mental health, seeing that social anxiety in Italian fathers, and I'm an Italian father myself, so I see those things of like when you don't know why people are doing the things that they're doing and it's causing you more anxiety, because he even talks about like she doesn't pay attention to things. I'm paying attention. I worry. She doesn't worry. And it's like, and that's why it's hard for him to connect with her because her mind is just so all over the place. He's like, no, we just drove 20 minutes to get here. Now you got to put your shoes on. Then you're talking to me as we're following a guy to our table. I don't know where we're going. Then we get to the table. How do you not know what we're getting? Boom. And I do this all the time. So the part where he was like, oh, you want me to go first? Okay, steak and veggies. Next. Like, that was a huge pop of a laugh because I think so many people, again, can connect with that joke. And it's like now, most of the time when me and my wife go out to eat, one of our favorite places is a steak joint, I just go, do you want me to order for us? Because I know what she's probably going to get. So outside of her changing her order up, I know exactly what she's going to get. And she gets all flustered. Even though she knows exactly what she's going to get, she'll be like, wait, and I'm like, hey, yo. the fucking whatever filet, medium, whatever, done like this, salad, boom, 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 sweet tea. There you go, done. And I'm like, what the hell is all this making a big, and that he brought that to life in such a relatable way. And I think that's what Sebastian is very good at doing. That's what a lot of comedians are good at doing, is when you're watching it with people, or when you're in the, place with people that you look at them and go, that's you, mother, And Sebastian does that in a very elegant way. Now, this is probably one of the grittier, if you could call it that, specials for Sebastian. Sebastian is usually a relatively, he tries to stay family friendly, which he definitely did. A little more swearing from Sebastian in this one, which doesn't bother me any. A little more sexual innuendo talks, a little more bumping grind action. Again, none of that it wasn't bad, but for me, I'm not really used to it from Sebastian. So every time there was one part towards the end, it was more of his closer, when he's talking about his dad and his urinary issues, and he's swearing a lot. That was one of the only times that I was like, it's really funny. It is really funny, but it takes you out of it for a minute, because you're like, I don't really know Sebastian is that guy. If I was getting that from, I don't even know, an Andrew Schultz or a Chris DiStefano or an Andrew Santino, I'd be like, oh, okay, I expect these boys are pretty gritty. I know what I'm going to get. But I don't know, something about when Sebastian did it, I just imagine there was an older couple in the audience that would have been like, oh, what, when did he start doing this? And I'm just trying to think of all the audiences, not just myself. The special was hilarious. I mean, it was very, very funny. I'm kind of over comedians touching on the COVID stuff. He did a great job of covering kind of both sides of it, where he's like, yeah, I got it, but I got it in a Walgreens. And he kind of said what most people, I think, at least considered during that time when everything was going on. And he's playing out this, I think, was a false scenario. Obviously, but he's playing it out as it's the public thought coming onto a very big stage. And I think he did a good job. So if you are going to touch on COVID, at least he wasn't being divisive. He was a little more, he went at the PC culture a little bit more. He starts with a thing about mentioning that there's an Asian man. He describes him. He's like, well, there's this Asian guy. And he goes, whoa, look how quiet it got in here when I said Asian guy. Why is everyone so upset about that? I don't know. I think sometimes comedians do have to maybe continue to create a problem that's not there. I don't think anyone in the audience would have been like, why did he say Asian man? But he was setting it up for the joke. And then later on, he, brings awareness to it, where he's like, there's an Asian kid in the class. He goes, yeah, that's my boy. He's like, yeah, I know. And it is that weird feeling where when you hear stuff like that in today's day and age, you do feel a sense of responsibility to be like, well, I shouldn't assume, right? I shouldn't assume that Asian guy is here to pick up that Asian kid. And he even says, in my neighborhood where I come from, those two are driving home together, or those two drove here together, or whatever it was. And it was like, he is still, it's still a paying homage to a time. And he says this, I came up in the 70s and 80s, and he was a kid during that time, and it was a simpler time. And I think he's acknowledging, just because it was a simpler time doesn't mean that it's what we should have done, or, I don't think he's agreeing with a lot of the things, but he's also paying light to all the craziness that's going on now. He talks about there's a kid that identifies as a lion, is 5 years old, and the way he's trying to navigate being a parent in today's world. And I think Sebastian does a very good job. After actually the point where I stopped 20 minutes in the first couple of times, that's really where he picks up and kind of comes into his own. I do feel like maybe, obviously he's tried this, he probably toured this throughout comedy clubs and stuff before doing this special, but I feel like maybe he was a little out of his special rhythm when he first started, or maybe there was just something going on. I will say he looked terribly uncomfortable in that tuxedo. He said at one point, I tried to get in shape for this. It didn't work. This thing's tight. It gave me anxiety the whole time, seeing how tight that white shirt is around his neck, and then he's got that bow tie, and he's a very physical comedian. So every time he's moving his head, I'm like, how can you move? And there's a few times you can see he turns his head like this. Like, he can't really turn. His uncomfort in the suit or in the tuxedo kind of a few times did play into me. I was like, yeah, you look really uncomfortable. And again, but that's who Sebastian is. You wouldn't see Sebastian Maniscalco do a special in a hoodie and jeans, standing there in some Air Maxes, or like Paul Verzi, where, he's not, that's not who he is. And that's what I love about comedy is you get the Paul Verzi's Italian dad, Sebastian Maniscalco, Italian dad, two totally different guys. Similar, I think, comedy styles when they like to dig at their dads. Italian dads are easy to go at sometimes. And just the things they say, they're very, the bravado, the way, like, I grew up around these people, so I get it. And I think that's why I love it so much. I'm interested to see where it goes. I felt like in the very beginning, it was like within the first 5 minutes of the special, Sebastian said something, and it was like a tag at the political culture. He says something, it didn't hit, it didn't really miss. It kind of fell onto a dull moment where I feel like he was still just getting started into the special, and he says something about his dad. I feel like there's a couple of these comedians that when they find themselves at a tough spot, they just go, oh, well, look at how much of an idiot my dad is. Chris Stefano, Shane Gillis, Sebastian Maniscalco, Paul Verzi, these guys, I think there is that similarity there that is undeniable. I think it's, and Shane Gillis is not like an Italian father, but he goes at his dad pretty hard throughout his comedy and into his podcast. And that's the other thing. Sebastian Maniscalco, not a great podcast comic. I can't stand. He has a podcast called Sebastian and Pete, and it's just no good. It's just not a good show. So it just shows you, like, these guys are good at what they do. Yes, they are in many spaces. I think Sebastian did a good job in The Irishman. But it was weird because, like, when you see them cross over like that, I didn't necessarily pay attention. It took me a second to be like, is that Sebastian Maniscalco? And then it was. And I was like, I told my wife, I go, oh, that's Sebastian Maniscalco. She had no idea. And I was like, the comedian, like one of the few comedians you actually like. And she's like, oh, the guy. She loves his joke from, I think it was his last special where he's talking about everyone's training MMA. He's like, they'll kick your leg off. She loves that. She loves that joke. And again, Sebastian is a easy comedy share. You can sit usually with your mom, your grandparents, and watch Sebastian, and everyone gets an appreciation for it. I will just say this out of curiosity for myself. I was almost curious if he was hinting at the fact that he's going through a divorce currently. He said that they're doing layoffs at the Maniscalco household. He had a lot of digs at him and his wife. He specifically, the one thing that I didn't enjoy, this comes from an Italian guy with an Italian mother, and I was raised by women. In the Italian, like, you don't say shit about your mom. When he was like, me and my wife were dumb. And he kept calling his wife dumb, and then he said, goes into the joke about Hamilton and whatever. But I didn't like him calling his wife dumb. That just, and I get it. I mean, I'm probably being too sensitive and just being like, oh, you don't know how to just let things be a joke. But at the same token, it's like, but I don't feel like old Sebastian would have done that. When he's talking about the way he parents his kids, he talks about how he's a little rougher. And I think he's trying to kind of continue the saga on of now he's the Italian dad who isn't going to let his son be this new type of guy that's trying to form. He's going to raise him to the standards of, our traditional Italian roots or whatever. I think in the first 20 minutes of this special, Sebastian was still trying to figure out what he was going to present to everyone and how he was going to set it up. And I think maybe he was reacting to the room as it was. Sebastian is one of the best comedians in the world. And I think Rogan might have said this, at playing to the pause. So when he says a punchline, he'll let a laugh ring for 10, 15 seconds. And that's a long time to stand on a stage and just kind of nod and look while people are laughing and still taking in what you're saying. That's the beauty of comedy a lot of times, and you've all been a part of it, where you've been in a room, somebody says something, people start to get it, and then it moves through the group of people, even if it's only 3 or 4 people, but it moves through like a wave where people are like, ha, oh, you mother, like, and they get it, and for a second, it's like, or it's a layered joke. Sometimes there are layers to things when you're like, and it was kind of a small callback when he was doing the COVID joke, but he was talking about how he got his at Walgreens, and trying not to give stuff away, but how they needed assistance in pharmacy, and the guy that was stocking Gatorades comes over to see what's going on. Well, then later, as he's getting his injection, the guy goes, well, you want a Gatorade or something? And again, he never said that the guy who was stocking Gatorades was the one who gave him the injection. He just made this weird, like, layered callback that once it's not going to take you a long time to be like, oh, that was fun. Okay, I get what he did there. But once you get to appreciate that type of layered comedy, you can move through the topical part of it, where you're like, I'm so tired of hearing these guys talk about COVID. It's like, well, see how they do it first. If they're just like, yeah, this sucks, and I think every stand-up comedian is going to play it safe, especially on Netflix. They're going to be like, oh, these people are idiots that think you should wear a mask all the time, and these people are idiots that think you should never wear one, and they're going to find this, like, I'm of the people stance. I think that's really just what comedian you watch. If you want the ones that are really just going to go hard and say wild shit about both sides, Chris DiStefano's, Mark Norman's are going to be your guys. Somebody like Sebastian, he works for networks. He does movies in the industry, so he's not going to come out. I was a little surprised that he just kept taking little jabs, like he was talking about Indian style is what they call it when you sit cross-legged as a kid. That's what we called it. Now, I know before he even said it, my kids don't call it that anymore. They say you sit down crisscross applesauce. And it was just funny to me, the things he was bringing up, because it was like, yeah, these aren't problems that we've changed them, but he's showing how it does slightly bother him, but change is uncomfortable, and I think that's just what he's bringing light to. And I think it's all through jest that you can see the growth and maturity of even stand-up comedians. When you see how they don't want to punch down, but there's a way to make the joke without making it at people's expense or making an enemy out of people. And I think Sebastian's very good at that. So I said all that to say, I love the special. Go check it out. It's available right now on Netflix. Is It Just Be Me by Sebastian Maniscalco. See you guys in the next one.